Hi and welcome back to the channel. My name is Luisa, but everyone calls me Lu, and today I'm sharing everything I need in 2025. This was by far my most productive year as a knitter. I tried new to me designers and yarns, learned new techniques, experimented a lot with my knitting, and most importantly, had fun. I finished 23 projects, and today I'll take you through them in the order I finished them from January all the way to December. I'll talk about the projects, the process, the patterns, the yarns, everything I loved and didn't love about each piece, and I've also added some quiet on-screen details like how long each project lived on my needles and an approximate cost in case you're curious. Of course, all patterns will be linked down below in the video description, and this is a long, cozy one, so feel free to grab your knitting, make a cup of something warm, and let's talk projects. And the first project I finished in 2025 was actually in late March. I didn't finish a single thing in January and February. In fact, I don't think I even picked up my needles in the first 2 months of the year. I had so much going on at the time outside my knitting life, let's say, that I don't think I needed a single stitch back then. But by spring, I finished my Thru Line Shawl by Andrea Mowry. I knit it out of BC Yarn Bio-Shetland wool in 3 different colorways. It was my first time trying out this yarn and I really liked it. My idea for this project was something neutral with a subtle splash of color, and I think I accomplished exactly that. It is mosaic colorwork because, as some of you know, I still am, but back then I was very much intimidated by stranded colorwork. This is something I'm trying to change in 2026. I have an entire colorwork journey planned for the new year, but back then it wasn't even a possibility, so I felt like mosaic colorwork was a good compromise. I could still get the look of stranded colorwork, well, sort of the same look, while still working with just one color at a time. This project took me 44 days to finish, so I definitely felt like I was moving at a snail's pace. First, I thought I was off gauge, and I didn't think about stopping and doing a mid-project block. I don't know why, because I am a fierce advocate for mid-project blocks, but at the time it didn't cross my mind, so I only blocked it when I bound off this project, and now I have a shawl that is 3 meters long. And if I don't know how to style a regular sized shawl, you can imagine I am completely lost with a shawl that is this long. The black stripes have some texture, but at least with my shawl this texture is completely lost. I don't know if it's because of the yarn I chose or what, but I don't mind it because I love wearing this, even not knowing how to style it. The first time I wore it was actually 2 or 3 weeks ago, because since I finished it during spring, it was too warm outside to wear a shawl. So the first time I wore it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I really love the texture and the entire style of it. And the second pattern I worked on in 2025 was the Belle and Sebastian Pullover by Sari Nordlund. I knit it out of Cardigan wool, and this is a heavy textured knit, but it's still pretty easy. The cables are simple, and I had a really good experience while working on this project. It was my first time knitting a Sari Nordlund pattern, and I really enjoyed her writing style, though I made quite a few changes to this pattern. Sometimes I cast on a project and I knit it as the pattern recommends the entire time, and sometimes I make a lot of modifications along the way. I don't know why, but I'm starting to notice this pattern with my knitting. This time around I wanted to change the sleeve construction. This pattern has some moss stitch panel on the body right next to the sleeves, and I didn't want the cables on the sleeves where they were. I wanted them to start at the top of the shoulder, so I decided to modify from a dropped shoulder to a satin sleeve. I don't know if satin sleeve is the right name for this kind of sleeve construction, but it's what I'm calling it. I have full details on how I approached this entire project in my Reverie project notes, as well as the podcast episodes from back when I was working on this project. It was my first time also knitting straight sleeves. I decided to skip all the decreases on the sleeves and knit straight down, so I have like a roomier sleeve, and I really liked the look of it. I was surprised by it actually. At first I felt like I wouldn't really enjoy it, but I did. I really like the look of it. It is really comfortable, but I don't reach for this sweater that much because I don't really like the texture of the yarn. I feel like I'm wearing something synthetic, so maybe if I paired it with one strand of mohair to make it softer, maybe I would enjoy it more. I don't know, but I want to give this sweater a proper try now that it's cold outside and see if I can make up my mind whether I like this sweater or not. Now, moving on, the next pattern I worked on was the Traveler Hoodie by Andrea Mowry. I chose to knit it out of Hostgarn Super Soft Held Double, and this project took me 116 days to finish. Half of it was probably spent on time out, since I was working on other projects at the time. I don't really know why this yarn is called Super Soft, because I don't really find it that soft, though I'm noticing it softens up quite a bit every time I wash this yarn, so maybe one day I will find it super soft. This pattern kept popping up on my feed on Instagram every day, all the time back then, and at first I wasn't really compelled to work on it. It didn't really attract my eyes very much, but after a while it was the only thing I could think of, and I was definitely influenced to work on a Traveler hoodie, so that's what I did. In fact, this is the one and only hoodie I have in my wardrobe, whether it's hand knitted or not. I really enjoyed the process of working on the hood. It has a lot of short rolls, there's an encasing for the drawstrings, and I also added some little end pieces to the drawstrings to make it look more like store-bought, and I really like the final look of it. I still don't know if these end pieces I added are made out of plastic or metal, so I'm still worried about damaging them by soaking in water when I wash this garment, but at the same time they are made for clothing, so they shouldn't get damaged by water. I don't know. I don't wear it that much because this sweater is so warm. It has to be freezing cold outside for me to be able to wear this without sweating. I tried it a couple of times. I started sweating almost immediately, so I had to take it off. But now it's winter. It is in fact freezing cold outside, so I'm hoping to get a lot of wear out of this sweater in the coming months. Next up is the Daily Stripes cardigan by Veronika Lindberg. This is one of the patterns featured in her latest knitting pattern book, Knits to Wear, and I knit it out of Istex Plotlopi, which is an unspun Icelandic wool. This was my first, and I think it's going to be my last time working with unspun. At first I thought this yarn was going to break all the time and I was going to have a terrible experience with it, but I didn't. I actually really enjoyed working with this yarn when I was working on the body and sleeves. The problem was when I got to the bind off. This was a 1x1 rib, so I decided to do an Italian bind off, and it was a terrible decision, a terrible experience. I really liked the look and the process of working on an Italian bind off, so I didn't really want to change to another bind off. But it was a complete pain to do an Italian bind off with unspun yarn. This yarn kept on breaking every 3 or so stitches, and it took me an entire day, and I do mean an entire day, to bind off the body. Wouldn't do it again. No way would I do it again, but I really like the texture of the yarn. It's unlike anything I have in my wardrobe, so it really stands out. I thought it was going to be maybe rustic, maybe too rough next to skin, but it's not. I actually really enjoy wearing it with just a t-shirt underneath, though keep in mind I don't have sensitive skin, so there's that. And this project is also my most oversized piece of everything I've knitted, and I really like the look of it when I try it on. So that has me thinking maybe I should size up my sweaters in the future to get a more oversized look, since I like this one so much. I don't know. When working on the button band, I actually learned a lot, and I talked about some of the tricks I learned in my favorite knitting tips and tricks video. And I also found the perfect buttons when I was traveling and visiting a yarn shop, so this is definitely a 10 out of 10 project for me. Now, after finishing the Daily Stripes cardigan, I fell in love with stripes. I fell down that rabbit hole, and I still am completely in love with stripes, so it was time to cast on another striped garment, and I chose the Lyon Sweater by PetiteKnit. I knit it out of Knitting for Olive merino, held double. It was my first time knitting with Knitting for Olive, and I completely understand why everybody is always talking about their yarn. I love the texture, the softness of the fabric, the stitch definition. My 1x1 rib with this yarn came out amazing, which is really tricky for me. 1x1 rib usually looks a little bit wonky when I work on it, but with this yarn it came out perfectly, if I do say so myself. And what really caught my eye and made me decide to work on this project was the European shoulder. At least that's what I've heard people calling this shoulder construction. I don't know if that's the right name or not, but what I do know is it gives such a good fit to this sweater. I love where the shoulder sits and everything. It has thin stripes, which gives this project a really potato chippy kind of experience, and it is also really easy to style it, which is something really important for me because I never know how to style my garments. I just put it on, do a little French tuck with a nice pair of jeans, and I'm good to go. So this is a perfect sweater for me. I would 100% knit it again. In fact, if something happened to my sweater, knocked on wood, I would immediately cast on another one. I also went with longer sleeves with this project. I found out I really enjoyed the look of longer sleeves. I find them really cozy, really comfortable to wear. It gives me extra warmth with sweaters. My first idea was to pair a dark red with my main color with this light grayish, light beige situation. But when I was buying yarn for this project, the color I wanted was sold out. So I went with this dusty pink, and I'm really happy with the final look. I enjoy wearing this piece so much. In fact, I would live in it if I could. Now, by summer, I was craving smaller projects, so I decided to cast on the Skyline Tee by Tori Yu. I knit it out of Rowan Cotton Revive, which is a blend of cotton and other fibers, and I'm just going to come out and say I'm not a fan of this yarn. Not because of the yarn itself, but because I find it really hard to hide where I've joined a new ball of yarn. When I wear this, I can see all the places where I've joined a new bow, and I find it a bit frustrating. I always feel like I could have done something better, but I tried many different techniques to weave in my ends, and they kept showing on the right side, so a bit frustrating when it comes to that. It is a saddle shoulder construction. It was my first time doing this kind of construction, and I really liked the process of working on it, though I found it a little bit hard to try it on and see if things were looking like they should be, especially when I was working on the upper body before joining back and front under the arm. It was a little bit tricky to see if I had the right length, the right width, and all of that. I also decided to do a minor modification to this pattern, and I swapped all the ribbing for twisted rib. I really like the process of working on a twisted rib, the look of it and everything, and I felt like this gave a minor elevated look to this piece, and I'm really happy I chose this little modification. The only thing I don't like about this project, I think it's the yarn, because when I try it on, I can see some excess of fabric here next to my armpits, and I always feel like I could have done something better, but I don't know how to fix it. I think it's because of the yarn. Maybe if I had chosen a softer yarn, or maybe a more lightweight yarn, I don't know. Maybe it would have a better drape next to my armpits, or maybe this construction is just not for me or my body type. I like this tee, I wear it, I just don't love it. It's not my favorite project of the year, but I still really much wear it. Now, to change things up a bit, I decided to cast on an accessory, and I worked on the Teddy Clutch by PetiteKnit. I wanted to try out boucle yarn, so I decided to use Drops Alpaca Boucle held double for this project, and I'm really glad I chose a project bag as a way to try out this yarn without committing to an entire garment out of boucle yarn in case I didn't like the experience of working with it or wearing it next to skin and things like that. I chose the bigger size just because I thought I would use this bag more if I had a bigger size, so that way I could fit a bigger project inside this bag. It didn't really work because I don't reach for it that much. I basically knit around the house, so I like to keep my projects in baskets. I just find it easier to take with me around the house. So I just reach for a project bag when I'm going to knit outside, like in the train, on the car and things like that. But I don't really like knitting on the train because I need to spread myself. I need space around me to keep my knitting, my needles, my scissors and everything, and I can't really do that when I'm on the train. When I'm knitting in the car, I feel like I'm losing the view around me, so don't really enjoy that either. I like knitting when I am at home, so that's what I do, and for that I don't really need a project bag. But go figure, I wanted to work on it and I'm really glad I did. I experimented with boucle yarn. I have a lovely clutch now and I'm really happy with it. Would I work on a boucle garment? I don't know, because this yarn, the fabric it creates, has 0 stitch definition, so from one point this could be a nice effect, a really soft squishy fabric, but I don't know if I would enjoy the experience. It would be hard to see my decreases and increases and everything, so I don't know if I would really enjoy the process of working on a boucle garment, but I really enjoyed working on a smaller project like a clutch. Then I needed to get back to sweater knitting and I decided to cast on the Clematis Sweater by Emma Maier. First I fell in love with the yarn and then I went on a hunt to find the perfect pattern for it. I didn't find it for many months, so when I came across the Clematis Sweater, I felt like it was a good match for the yarn I wanted to use. So that's what I did. I knit it out of Malabrigo sock in the colorway 343 Legend. I fell completely in love with this yarn, and with the Clematis Sweater I felt like this yarn would really shine, but it also had the diagonal button band to add some visual interest without overshadowing the yarn. This pattern is written for one strand of mohair, but I didn't really want to add mohair and hide most of my main yarn, which was this Malabrigo sock. So I decided to regrade the entire pattern and knitted it at a fingering weight gauge. And I couldn't love this project more. I couldn't be happier with it. I have a fingering weight garment that looks more like a long-sleeved shirt instead of a proper sweater, which is something I don't have in my wardrobe, so I really like that because I can wear this during spring, sometimes even summer and fall, without needing a sweater weather to wear this, so I feel like I can get more wear out of this piece. I alternated skeins throughout this project to avoid any color pooling, and I think it was very successful because the entire garment looks pretty even. The color came out a bit more open than what I would go for, but for a long-sleeved shirt I think it's fine. For a sweater I think it would maybe be too open, but for a long-sleeved shirt I think it's fine. In fact, I would love to work on a black version of the Clematis Sweater. I don't have any plans for now, for the near future I mean, but I would love to have a black version of the Clematis Sweater. Now for my next project I had to go there and grab it because I worked on a December bowl by PetiteKnit. I used old cotton leftover from my stash when I worked on a really old project many years ago, and this is such a cute pattern. I wanted a little touch of handmade decor here in my craft room, so I immediately thought of the December bowl by PetiteKnit, so this is what I did. I have 3 of these, I just grabbed one to show you, and I'm really happy with my final project. I added some stripes to make it more fun. I think it's well established now that I love stripes, but in this case I also needed the stripes because I didn't have, or I thought I didn't have, enough yarn to work on a single color bow. When I finished it, I saw that I actually had enough yarn, but according to my math, I didn't, so certainly I did something wrong when calculating meterage. But I really like the stripes. It adds some visual interest and I think it makes more fun. I really like the look of it, especially if it's going to hang on the wall as a little decor. I think the stripes are a really good little extra touch. This was a really cheap project. I used stash yarn, but had I bought yarn for this project, it would have cost me around 13 to 14 euros, including the pattern. I made quite a few modifications just to make my life easier because it was going to be on the wall. If I were to wear this in my hair or as a Christmas ornament, I would definitely follow the pattern to get a more polished look, more polished finishings. But for a wall decor, I think it's fine as is. And I am really happy with my little December bow. After that, I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, and I decided to cast on the Pierre Sweater by Johanna Gehrisch. I knit it out of one strand of Rose Yarn Super Soft that I got from my mom's this stash, and I paired it with one strand of Knitting for Olive mohair that I really wanted to try out. I really liked their mohair base. It was a perfect color match for the green from my Super Soft main yarn. And like I said, I got this cone of Super Soft from my mom's this stash. So because of that, the cost of my project was really low, around 51 euros, which makes it extra special. I'm so proud of this project. In fact, I think it's the finished object I'm most proud of. It was my first lace garment. I think it was actually my first ever lace project in general. It came out so good and I've worn it many times now. When I first opened the pattern PDF, I thought, what did I get myself into? It looked so complicated, but I took a deep breath. I read one section at a time and things slowly started to make sense, and it is now a very successful project. It has this gorgeous lace pattern and paired with mohair, it adds a little bit of softness to the fabric. I love using mohair with lace and cables. I just really like the fuzziness the mohair gives to the fabric. But this pattern is definitely a pay attention all the time kind of project. I couldn't work on it while watching a movie or reading a book and things like that. I definitely had to focus, had my entire focus on this sweater. So when I was working on the sleeves, I had already finished the entire body. So I started to lose my interest, not my interest, but I started to get tired of this project because I had to pay so much attention when I was working on it to make sure I didn't make any mistakes with the lace, because I don't know how to fix mistakes with lace. So I was trying to be very careful and it worked out. Everything is fine now, but it was definitely a very hands-on project. The only thing I wish I had done was extra long sleeves. I need to go back and add one pattern repeat to both sleeves to get a length that looks like this. In fact, I just did some surgery in the sweater I'm wearing today to fix this same issue, but now I need to go back to this Pierre sweater and add a little bit of length to the sleeve just to make it 100% perfect, because right now it's like 95% perfect. And since we were in the thick of summer, I decided to cast on another hand-knit tee, and it was time for the Lyra Tee by Irene Lin. I knit it out of Sonja's Garden Team Line. It was my first time trying out this yarn, and I really liked it. It is a cotton, linen, viscose blend, and it's very airy, soft, and comfy to wear in the summer heat. I basically knitted the yoke 2 times because the first time I did it, it came out way too big. I had too many stitches on my needles. You could basically fit 2 of me inside the yoke. So I had to frog it and do a little bit of math and figure out the right stitch count for me. Now I have roomy sleeves, but it's not as oversized, let's say, as the pattern photos. I really like the look of it, and actually I think I even prefer the look of it. It is fingering weight with twisted rib, so it's definitely a more slow pace in terms of progress with this project, at least for me. Fingering weight requires extra time. Twisted rib requires extra work. So yeah, it was definitely slow going, but also pretty much worth it because I really love the polished look of it. I feel like I look dressed up even with minimal effort when I put on this tee, and I really like that. Also, the price point of the finished object was 31 euros, which I think it's pretty good for a hand knit tee. But now I have so much left over. I don't know if I read the wrong meterage when I was buying yarn for this project, or if I just used less yarn than what the pattern calls for. I don't really remember the numbers now. What I know is I have so much left over and no plans for it, but maybe I will come up with a fun pattern to work on when it's summer again. Now, I said I wanted to experiment with my knitting, and I decided to cast on my first pair of socks. It was actually the first pair of socks I really wanted to get it right instead of just knitting a pair of socks at random. So I decided to cast on the Cuff Club Volume 1, the January chart, because with this pattern you get around 12 charts for the cuff of the sock and the base pattern, so you can mix and match and create really cute pairs of socks. So I decided to cast on the January chart, which I really liked, but at the same time it felt like a really simple pattern to follow, a really simple chart to follow to improve the chances of everything going right. I didn't really enjoy the process of working on a heel flap and gusset. It was my first time doing this kind of heel, and I didn't like it at all. The heel flap was a pain to knit. I didn't really enjoy it. And then I have to pick up stitches on the sides of the heel flap. I don't like picking up stitches. Heel flap and gusset, it's not for me. So later on I decided to experiment with short row heels. But at first, when I finished this pair of socks, I thought I had a good fit, but now I think it's maybe too baggy of a sock. Maybe I should have more negative ease than I do with this pair of socks. But at the same time, I don't know, because I don't want to wear my hand knit socks with shoes. I just want to wear them with slippers around the house, just to be cozy and wear something handmade. I don't plan on wearing my socks with shoes, so I don't think it really makes any difference being too baggy of a sock or too fitted of a sock. Everything works just fine, so I'm not really worried about it. It's just kind of frustrating because I feel like I didn't get the right fit. But this was my first for real pair of socks, and this project cost me around 11 to 12 euros. So I really like the price point for the project I got in the end. Now, I wasn't satisfied with knitting just one project bag. I wanted a second one, so I decided to cast on the Honey Clutch by PetiteKnit. I knitted it out of the leftovers from my Thru shawl, so one strand of BC Garn Bio Shetland in the Rust colorway, and I paired it with one strand of Knitting for Olive mohair because I loved their mohair, and I love the final color of the fabric I got pairing these two yarns together. I like the idea of hand knitted bags, but I don't know if I would wear them because I think whatever I put inside would make the fabric wear down a lot and look a little bit wonky over time. So I don't know about hand knitted bags, but I really like the idea of hand knitted project bags. So that's what I was hoping for when I cast on the Honey Clutch. It is a honeycomb brioche stitch, so it was something new for me, a new technique, a new stitch pattern to try out. And I really liked the process of working on it, though it felt a little bit daunting towards the end, because with brioche, I don't have a lot of experience with brioche, but I felt like I need a lot of rows and make small progress, so I was getting tired of it by the end, but at the same time I was basically done with the clutch when I was done with the honeycomb brioche stitch. So it gave me extra energy just to work on the double knitting at the top to finish the clutch. But I will say the hardest part of this pattern was sewing the zipper. It took me 5 times to get it right. Now I am pretty happy with it. I am satisfied with the zipper. It works really well. It is not catching on the yarn or anything. So I'm pretty happy with it. It was definitely worth it, but it took me 5 tries to get it right. So also a little bit frustrating. Before sewing the zipper, I felt like this would be the easiest part of the entire pattern, but it was not, but at the same time, it was completely worth it. Would I work on an entire garment with honeycomb brioche stitch? I don't think I would. I think I would get tired of it pretty quickly. It is gorgeous, and I think it works extremely well for a clutch because it's a small size project, but for an entire garment, I think I would lose steam pretty quickly. But I really like the clutch I got, and I definitely need to use it more. Now, the last tee I cast on in the summer was the Lusk Tee by Rebecca Clow. I love this pattern because it offers so many customization possibilities, long sleeve, short sleeve, texture, stockinette stitch, and everything. So I really wanted to have this pattern in my library, and I decided to cast it on using Knitting for Olive Pure Silk. I think you get it now that I really liked their yarn, and I wanted to try out as many different bases as I could. So this time I knitted with 100% silk, and I really liked the fabric it created. It is soft, it is breezy, it is lovely to wear when it's warm outside. I love the pattern customization possibilities. I came up with this simple stitch pattern, this texture that is really easy to knit. I explained it in my Ravelry project notes in case you want to see exactly what I did row by row. And I also used way more yarn than what the pattern calls for. I think that's because of the changes I made. I did this textured stitch pattern, and I also think I added a little bit of length to my sleeves. I don't know if I added the length to the body, I don't remember it now, but maybe I did. Anyway, I just used a little bit more yarn than what the pattern calls for, but I really love the final look of my Lusk Tee. It is a fingering weight project, which I love to add more diversity to my knitting wardrobe. And I finished this project in 34 days. Next up is the only project I don't have with me to show you, which was the Always Forever Unicorn Sweater by Wool and Beyond. And that's a really long name. I used Drops Air for this project, which is the recommended yarn. This is a kid's pattern, and I made it for my little niece. I gifted it to her over Christmas, and she's been loving unicorns lately. She was so happy, and it made my day, it made my week, it made my month. Seeing her face when she opened the package and saw a unicorn sweater. She loves it so much, and she was wearing it the next day, and it made me so happy. It was my first time knitting in tarja, so it was a new technique for me to try out. I really liked the process of it, though it was a little bit messy. I needed so many different balls of yarn attached to the project, and it was a thing. I needed to work on it when I was sitting by my desk to make sure I had control of where my balls of yarn were. Otherwise, it would get all tangled, it would be a whole mess. And this is a pretty simple intarsia pattern. I really enjoyed the process of it once I got the hang of how to deal with so many yarn balls next to me. And now I have a little bit of leftover, but I don't know what to do with it. This yarn is really soft, really squishy. I really loved the final texture. It is really lovely next to skin, especially being a kid's pattern. And for the mane, I used a little bit left over from another project I also knitted for my niece. I knitted the Lulu Sleepover Junior. I think that's the name of the pattern. But I used a little bit of leftover from that project to get the mane, and I really love the final look of it. I just made one minor modification to the pattern, which is just the embroidered eye. The pattern calls for a sleeping eye, and I felt like a smiling one would maybe fit her mood a little bit better. So I went for a smiling eye, and I'm really happy with that. This is one of my favorite projects of 2025. And I really hope she likes wearing this sweater because I want to work on another one in a bigger size in the future. So fingers crossed she will love wearing this unicorn sweater. Now the next project was kind of a surprise, like kind of a impulsive cast on, because my first idea was to work on the birch pullover by Andrea Mowry using host yarn super soft that I had from my stash, left over from my stash, but couldn't really make it work with the texture of the birch pullover. I didn't really like it. The fabric felt too open. You couldn't see the texture of the stitch pattern, so it was a no-go. I decided to frog it. So impulsively, I cast on the Stripe Hype sweater because I really wanted to use that yarn, Host Yarn Super Soft. So I paired the 3 colorways I had with another colorway from my stash, which was the beige yarn that became my main yarn later on. So this is the Stripe Hype sweater by Veronika Lindberg or Kutova Kika. And like I said, I added the beige yarn, and I'm so glad I had all these colorways in my stash, because if I had bought yarn specifically for this project, I don't think I would have paired these 4 colorways together. But I'm really glad I had them all in my stash because I love the final look of it. I think this is one of my favorite knits of 2025. I think I said that many times now, but I had so much fun with my knitting in 2025 that I feel like every project is one of my favorites. So this is a really good feeling to have. But since this is a fingering weight yarn, I didn't want to hold it double because I loved my Clematis Sweater in a fingering weight gauge so much that I wanted another fingering weight sweater or long sleeved tee. I decided to recreate this pattern also for a fingering weight gauge. So I knitted it out of Host Yarn Super Soft held single, and I absolutely loved the fabric it created. It's very lightweight. I think I will be able to wear this when it's a little bit colder during summer, and especially spring and fall, but also with a thick coat over it when it's winter. So very versatile. I love the colors. And the sweater also grew a lot with blocking. I think I got like 10 extra centimeters with this project after blocking, but I don't mind it because I love the fit. It is a little bit oversized, but I think the fit is really good and I wear this a lot. It was also a really quick project. I finished it in 32 days while working on other projects at the same time. So definitely a quick knit for the way I knit, and this project cost me 22 euros, which is the cherry on top of this perfect project. Now, by fall, I was ready to get back to sweater season, but first I needed to finish my sweet shop blanket, which I cast on back in March. I think beginning of March or around that time was when I cast on my sweet shop blanket by Laura Penrose, and this project took me 7.5 months to finish. Half of it was probably spent on timeout because I found out that I don't really like working on so many projects at the same time. I have a maximum of 3 projects at the same time. More than that, I get anxious. I feel like I'm not making progress in any project, so I get frustrated. Yeah. My sweet spot is 3 projects at the same time, and that's it. So coming fall, I was ready to finish this blanket. I used many different sock yarns that I had. Some of it I had in my stash, some of it I bought. I think most of it actually I bought specifically for this project, and I held it double throughout to get a DK weight gauge. I have no idea how much this project cost, and I don't want to know because this is a massive project. I'm sure it is very expensive for how much I want to spend on a single project. I don't need to know the cost for every single project, and I think I prefer to close my eyes for this one and to look to the side a bit. Talking about the process of working on this blanket, this project is a bit deceiving because it is way more knitting than it looks like. Each triangle took me around 1 hour to knit up, so a lot of time spent working on this project, but I am really happy with the way it came out. My first idea was to knit a really big blanket, like a bed size blanket, 10 by 12 squares, but when I was around halfway through, I started to think this was a bad idea because most of my colorful yarns had a good percentage of cotton. So I felt like this blanket would maybe be too light for winter, but it was definitely going to be also too warm during summer. I decided to pivot a little bit, and I bound off when I got to a 10 by 7 squares size, just to have my lap and legs warm when it's really cold outside. Because of that change of plans, I have so much left over from this blanket and absolutely no idea what to do with it. So now everything is hanging behind me in my pegboard. But that's a problem for future me. Right now I'm just happy I finished my blanket. And the next project I worked on was sweater number 15 by My Favorite Things. This was one of my dream knits for such a long time, and I finally decided to cast it on, and I couldn't be happier with how the sweater came out. I used Rosa Pomar Mondin paired with one strand of Easy Girl Alpaca 1. It was my first time knitting with any of these two yarns, and I loved both of them. I want to work with them more in the future. I have no plans for the near future now for this Mondin yarn, but I definitely want to work with it more. It is Portuguese wool. I really love the texture. The smell of this yarn is amazing. I loved the fabric it created. It is really comfy, really soft, and paired with this texture from the cable, I think it adds an extra softness, an extra squishiness to this entire garment, and I'm so happy with it. I really like having options with my hand knits. Some projects with mohair, some without mohair, some with alpaca, some fingering weight, dicky weight and everything. So I think this added a bit of variety to my 2025 lineup. I definitely put off casting on this project for a long time because I was worried it's going to be maybe too daunting to finish it because it's all over cable. It's always the same cable, so I felt like I would maybe lose interest, but I'm happy to say it didn't happen at all. I was very much excited to work on it when I cast it on and when I found off, and it is also effortless to style. I just love wearing it. There's nothing else to say. I also have straight sleeves, 0 decreases, extra long length, so this sweater is like all the coziness possible in just one garment. It took me 33 days to finish it. I expected to need more time to finish it, but like I said, I was so excited to work on this. I just kept on working on it. What really sold me on this project before I decided to cast it on was the shoulder detail with that little cable on the back of the shoulder. I love the look of it. It gives a more modern, maybe store-bought even, and I really love this extra accent. And in fact, I would love a version of this in black. I think it would be gorgeous, and maybe I will cast this on one day because it would be perfect. The sweater in black would be perfect. After finishing another sweater, it was time to give it another try to sock knitting, and I cast on the same pattern, Cuff Club Volume 1, but this time I decided to cast on the base pattern and not add any colorwork chart to the cuffs. Just add some stripes because, you guessed it, I love stripes, and I used the same yarns. My idea was to knit different pairs of socks, all using the same yarn. So after a while I would have matching pairs of socks that would have the same yarn but different charts, different textures, maybe cables, color work and stockinette and all of that. So this time I decided to add stripes because that would keep the stockinette fabric in the entire sock. Maybe it would be easier to play around with my stitch counts and everything until I figured out the perfect fit for my socks. Since I didn't like working on a heel flap and gusset, I decided to go with a short row heel, and I chose the Shadow Wrap short row heel, which according to what I read online, this is a deeper short row heel. It adds extra fabric to my instep, so I really liked the fit of it. I loved the process of working on the short row heel. I would work on it again on a new pair of socks, but although I decreased my stitch counts for this sock, I still think I have a baggy sock. I still like the fit of it because, like I said, I don't plan on wearing my socks with shoes. So I like the fit of it, but I still think I should have maybe more negative ease than I do with this second pair of socks. I don't know, I need to learn more about sock knitting, I need to study it. I think with socks it takes a lot of tries to get to a good fit for your feet, and I don't know if I'm willing to go through this process because I really enjoy working on garments, especially sweaters, and I'm not really that excited to work on socks, especially if I have to knit a lot of socks to get to a good fit. So that makes me lose my motivation even more. So I don't know if I'm willing to go through all the trouble of getting a perfect fit sock, but for now these are the two pairs of socks I have in my drawer. So to bring back my motivation, it was time to cast on another dream knit of mine, and this time I chose the Late Summer Wrap by Pernille Larsen. I knit it out of the recommended yarn, which is Knitting for Olive Merino paired with their mohair base. It was my first time doing a Knitting for Olive combo. I wanted to try their combo for a really long time, and I'm really glad I did it. I loved the final fabric. Really soft, really squishy. It is a wrap, which is something I've been wanting to cast on for a long time. And I also had to play around with the stitch counts a little bit because the first time I knitted the yoke of this wrap, it came out way too big. My sleeves were going to be too oversized and I didn't think it would match the look of a wrap. I think a wrap has to be a little bit more fitted, especially around the waist. So I had to frog the entire yoke and knitted a second one with less stitches on my needles, and the second one came out way better than the first one did. But I also didn't like the bands on the body, so I decided to modify that for a double knit band, a double knit as you go band. So I had to play around with that to make it work in terms of roll gauge difference between the stockinette fabric and the double knit band. But everything worked out fine in the end. I'm really happy with my final project, but I still haven't worn it. I don't know why. I think it's because I don't know how to tie the knot on the waist in a very secure way, just so I don't worry about it coming undone when I'm on the go somewhere. My first idea was to tie it at the back, but when I did that, I felt like I had a tail. The tie was definitely too long to tie at the back, so I decided to tie it at the side here, front of the body, but to a little bit to the side, and it definitely felt better. It looked better, and I felt more confident, I would say, with the tie on the side. But I definitely need to come up with a cute and safe way to tie it at the side. Otherwise, I know I'm not going to wear this, just like it's happening now, but I don't know what I can do. So maybe I need to look online for creative ways to tie a wrap. This project took me 67 days and I definitely wasn't prepared for that when I cast it on. I didn't think about how much extra work a wrap is in comparison to a sweater. You have to knit basically two fronts because of the wrap situation, and then there's a really long tie, well, two ties, and it is so much extra work, so it took me a little bit extra time to finish it. And this is also my most expensive project of the year, if we don't consider the blanket, but I don't want to talk about the cost of the blanket. So this project cost me 117 euros. Definitely on the high end of how much I want to spend on a project, but since this was my dream knit, I really like the fit of it. I just need to wear it finally, and once I do, I think I'm going to wear this a lot, so I'm really happy I took the time to work on this dream knit of mine, and this is a lovely finished object. We are getting to the end of the list, and next up is the double knit scarf by Hello Hugo Life. I wanted to cast on another neck accessory and I decided to knit from stash. So for this project I used one strand of long yarns Yavol, which is a sock yarn really similar to Fiucolana Aveta, and I paired it with one strand of knitting for olive mohair that I had in my stash. I love the fabric it created and the simplicity of this project. It is quick, it is relaxing, it is easy to style, which is really important for me. So with this project, I feel like I actually know how to style a neck accessory, although only this neck accessory, but that's a minor detail, nobody needs to talk about this. It is a stockinette project, at least I worked it as a stockinette project, but this pattern is written for a double knit fabric. I just changed to stockinette because I think it's more mindless for the way I knit and how much time I want to spend on these neck accessories. After the project is finished, it's basically the same look as a double knit fabric, but I find the process of stockinetting the round more enjoyable, so that's what I did. It is comfy, it goes with everything. This dark purple color, I think it suits my skin tone really well, and I can see myself working on another double knit scarf in every single color of the rainbow because I loved the process, I love the final object, and I've been wearing it a lot ever since I finished it. I want to work on more neck accessories in the winter, so maybe I will work on another one. I don't know. I think I want to try out new patterns, but I can definitely see myself working on another double knit scarf, and I think this is the perfect gift knit. Quick, cheap, and really enjoyable process. This project took me 33 days to finish and it cost me 31 euros, so I think this is a really good price point for a neck accessory. And my second to last finished object of 2025 was my Christmas sweater, and I decided to cast on the Olga Sweater by PetiteKnit. I knit it out of raw and Norwegian wool in 2 different colorways. I just got inspired by another knitter on Ravelry and I used the same colorways she used in her project. I really liked the yarn and the process of working with it, but it needs blocking. This project really bloomed after blocking. The stitch definition was so much better, the stitches looked more even, the ribbing looked way neater, but I'm still not a fan of the look of 1x1 ribbing with this yarn. I said it before, 1x1 ribbing is really tricky for me, so it's not with every yarn that I get a really neat 1x1 rib. But I still like the way it came out in this sweater. I'm not a fan, but I like it. I wore it one time on Christmas Day actually, and nobody said anything, which made me kind of sad because people know I knit. People know I probably wear hand knitted things, and nobody commented on my sweater, and I spent the entire Christmas Day thinking, isn't anybody going to comment on my sweater? Hello, I'm wearing hand knitted sweater. This is my Christmas sweater. Isn't anybody going to say, oh, that looks good? Yeah, but nobody did. But this is a high maintenance sweater, I think, because like I said, I wore it one time and you can already see some peeling on this sweater. I have it with me actually, and I didn't de-peel it because I wanted to show you the peeling, because this is from one wear alone and it looks like I've been wearing it for months on end. So yeah, I think this is going to be a high maintenance project, but at the same time I really like the final look of it. There's just one minor issue with the color. It came out a little bit tighter than what I would like, so it's a little bit tight to get it through my head, but I can still do it without losing an earring or anything like that. But I would prefer if I had a little bit of extra room around my neck. But I wore it during Christmas Day, like I said. I was worried it would bug me a bit having too tight of a collar, but it didn't, so I guess I'm going to leave it as is for now at least, and we'll see what I think about it later on. But this was my Christmas sweater and I'm really happy with it. And my last cast on of 2025 was the Violeta Pullover by Gloria Quintanilla. I used a Fiucolana combo, pairing one strand of their mohair base, which is called Tilia, with their sock yarn, which is Filcolana Arvita. I bound off on Christmas Day, so just in time for the new year and to make it into my 2025 lineup. It is the softest fabric I've ever seen with my hand knitted items. It is softer than my Knitting for Olive combo, which I was really surprised because I already felt like that one was really soft and this is softer. So if you could get your hands on this Filcolana combo, I would highly recommend it. I still haven't worn it because I've just bound off, so it's been blocking this whole time, but I really love it so far. I need to wear it and see how the fabric behaves, but so far so good. I love mixing cables and lace, especially when pairing with mohair, and I enjoyed every single stitch on this project. I really did. I was worried at first that the color would maybe flare out because I was seeing some pictures from project pages and things, and the color was flaring out quite often, but I don't have this issue with my iteration of the Violeta Pullover. I did just one twisted rib modification. I love twisted rib and I felt like it matched the entire look of this sweater, and I really love the final look of it with the twisted rib adaptation. I think this is also my only raglan sweater in 2025, and I love the fit of it. I think it fits really good with my body type, so I want to work on more raglan sweaters in 2026. I think I'm going to accomplish this goal, but I want to play around more with raglan sweaters because I think it is really good so far. I also used some washi tape when I was following the charts when working on this pattern. I got this idea from Kutova Kika's gift box that she announced over on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and I had never thought of using washi tapes to follow charts. I did it with this sweater and I loved the process of it. Until then I was using that Coco Knits Makers board, I think that's how it's called, but it takes up a lot of space. I don't really like it. I love the practicality of using washi tapes, so that's what I did, and this is by far my favorite knit of 2025. I just need to wear it. Looking back at all these projects, I'm really grateful for the time I got to spend making things with my hands this year. Some of these knits will stay with me in my wardrobe for a long time, some were part of the learning process, and all of them mark a moment in this year of my life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'd love to know which project stood out to you the most, or what you're hoping to knit in the coming year. If you haven't already, I would love if you subscribed, gave this video a like, so you don't miss future videos. I'll be back next week with the first knitting update of 2026, sharing everything that's on my needles right now. Until then, happy knitting, and I wish you a lovely new year. Bye!